I just graduated from Parsons, Design and Technology MFA.
So we're part of the group, as Johnny mentioned, New Forms of Data Representation. And so how we started this project, we started thinking of what data we want to represent and how we want to represent them. And as we looked into more and more data, we realized that there's such a large spectrum of data, like everything's data, everything's information, there's pattern in everything. And we started looking into just like how, like the spectrum of how large and how small things are, things like network in single cells organisms like slime molds, or really big networks like the satellites that we use to predict our weather. And so that's this idea of this macro level thing and this micro level thing, and something very man-made and something that is born in nature. And so we wanted to tie these
More growing patterns. So how can we interact into those growing patterns by using those signals coming from the satellites? We'll start from the signal itself. We are using NOAA. Will make sense as we go more in detail into every point. So for starters, I want to talk about this antenna. This antenna, it was made specifically for 137 megahertz. This is the frequency that the weather satellites emit. So this is suitable to get those signals that we were trying to gather. We started with a different version of antenna that wasn't as accurate, so it was very important to get this working to get the first successful recording. And also, we realized that we had to be very accurate with the audio sample that we had, because otherwise it was a lot more distorted, a lot more noise. So this is the ecosystem that I'm going to show right now. So as I was saying, the antenna, we built it here within the facilities. It's very basic. It's just two pieces of aluminum rod and a coaxial cable that put together in the proper angle. It allows us to make this radio connection. And here we have three important pieces of the process. First of all, this is Gcode. This is a software that allows us to see in real time where each satellite is, because you cannot just get the signal at any point. The satellite needs to be just on top of us to get the proper signal to the antenna. So this is what we were using to make the predictions, and then we had to go to the parking lot to get the signal and then come back and analyze it. So this was a key part of the process. And then, as you can see in the second picture, we were outside. We tried two different locations. One was the parking lot and then the rooftop. But the parking lot became more successful because there was a lot more space around us, that we had less noise. And then the last piece is another software called Cubic SDR. That's the one that connects to this cable, is attached to a dongle that you cannot see, but you can see later. This is called software-defined radio, and this is what it's allowing the software to read the signal from the antenna. And we are not able to show live a satellite recording because there's none happening right now, and we are inside. However, as you can see, there's an audio wave right now going on, and there are different parameters that we've been working with and to set the proper parameters for the satellites. But what I can show is that if you don't have a satellite, you can have music. So it still works as an antenna for FM radio to get music. Should I?
Active.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last piece for us to make sure that we had a signal working is we knew how the signal was going to sound because we've seen it before, but this is one of the recordings that we had, but we didn't know how good it was until finally we got into this part of the process that's trying to decode the image, and as you can see, it's very crappy. So we had lots of work on trying to understand why it wasn't working. Sorry about that. It's going to keep clipping. And then after being able to treat a lot of parameters and getting a good satellite, as you can see, the results on the right are much better. This is the best we've gotten so far, but we are very proud of that one because it's just 2 rods and a piece of wire that got us there.
Yeah. And so from that point, we wanted to find our own way in making sense of the encoded message instead of just translating into the image. So as you heard just now, the sound file literally just sounds like beeps. So this is what it sounds like. So we can't make sense out of this without basically an algorithm to translate it into something. And so I tried translating it into different patterns. So here I used the FFT algorithm to sort of track the most prominent frequency. And with that frequency, I then tracked when it was beeping. So whenever it beeps, it turns black. And whenever it doesn't beep, it's white. And so this is, it's just, so it goes like this. This is the time, and then it goes beep, and then silence, and then beep, beep, silence, beep, silence. And this is the different patterns that I tried with lower resolution. This is all in the hope to find, in the end, a pattern to feed the slime molds and let them grow. And so once I sort of got the sense of how the beeping works, I then tried to make it into a circular format to fit the Petri dish, and also try to make it in a spatial layout that optimizes the growth of the slime mold. And so in the end, it looks something like this. So I ran the sound files of each satellite through the algorithm, and this is what it looked like. And to print this onto the Petri dish, I had to lower the resolution even more. So these are the end visuals for the 2 NOAA recordings, and this is for the 18 recordings. This is for the NOAA 19 recordings. So from here, you can actually see that each message is slightly different, just like how weather is different all the time. And this one Petri dish basically represents one satellite message or one satellite image. And from that point, we then use the visual that's created to print the food or the oats for the slime mold.
Yes, just like going back a little bit. I think that like this last part of the pipeline is very important because there are a lot of elements involved. So we have one script that connects both the printer and the pump that's going to provide these oats to the Petri dish that we needed. And then this is important because we are feeding the Gcode that contains the data that's coming from the satellite. So all those elements kind of like intertwine in this step. And to do that, we needed some kind of medium that was good enough. And we found in the 3D printer a good way in order to create coordinates, but we had one because the 3D printer is good for extruding but not for fluids. So what we did is customize an existing 3D printer and adding a new control board with a new firmware that allow us to manually send those coordinates, and afterwards with the script kind of like feeding all that data. And in that end you can see the whole system. And you want to explain this?
Yes, and so from the visuals just now, I turned it into an SVG format in order to turn it into the Gcode, which is the code that the printer reads. And so if we were to read this in plain English, it would be set the speed to 600 times and set the current position as home, which is coordinate x0, y0, and z0, and then go to position x20, y34, and then pause and drop the oat, and then repeat. So it goes position, drop, lift, and then go to the next position, and then drop, and then lift. And so with that, I think we can show you how it works on the printer instead of watching this video. So if we go on Magic Oats and print,
that's the script
this should connect to the
that
printer.
we were talking about.
Oops, not connected to printer. 1 second. Disconnect.
Okay. So with the terminal over there, what we are doing is we are calling this script that is going to connect all the components in order to move the printer and then drop the oat.
So right now it's setting the home and it's moving the position. And then it pauses to squeeze the oats. And the oats are basically being squeezed based on this hydraulic system that pushes the water, that then pushes the oat down the Petri dish.
Yeah, it works similarly to a normal 3D printer, but instead of like heating the plastic to let it like sit on the plate, it's just pumping a little bit of fluid every time.
Yeah. Okay, and last but not least, the slime mold. So once we're done printing its food, we dropped each slime mold in the middle. And this is a zoomed-in version of what happens when we drop the oats and then put in the slime mold. So this is a time lapse of the slime mold. The slime mold is an organism that tries to follow the food by finding its most efficient route. So from point A to point B, at first it would random in all directions until it hits the food. And then it would communicate to other cells that would point it in that one direction only. So this is a time lapse of the slime mold growing. Each video is about like two hour long that is being condensed into about 30 seconds long. So you can really see it sort of pulsing, and once it finds the food, it just speeds up everything. So that's the slime mold in a very zoomed in picture. But if we were to look at it from the coordinates that we were looking at just now, each message looks very different. Oh, this is the photo version. So what the modes are essentially doing are connecting the dots that we provide for them. And this is what each message looked like in the end. So this is one satellite message. The NOAA 15. This is the NOAA 18. Another one of the NOAA 18. And this is the NOAA 19. And another one of the NOAA 19. And these photos were taken just a day before I did another photo shoot. And it changed so much from the day before to this day. It sort of just grew out of the Petri dish. And these are the results that we got in the end.
Yeah, if you want to look closer to it, we have a display over there with 6 of them, 2 of each satellite. And then later on, we also have 6 prints over there where you can see the decoded image too. Yeah, so going back to the whole system again, as you can see, there are a lot of elements, but each of them is very important in the whole pipeline. And for us, it was a process of like just going step by step, tweaking each of them to make sure that we are getting something better. And I think that it was failing and trying again, until we got the system working. And anything that you want to
No, we're going to set up the microscope after, so if you guys want to play or look into the slide modes, then you can.
Yes. Also, we were discussing about what next, or what you want to do with this. So I think that there are so many ways to push this forward, but also we want to make this project accessible. We were very methodical when we were going over step by step, so we have a lot of documentation, and in the midterm, I don't think it's going to happen right away. We are going to post everything online, so if anyone is interested, they can access to the content and then reproduce the process, and why not make it different or improve it. And if you have any questions.
I have a question. Hi. One question, can you just talk about some of the challenges that you guys faced? I mean, it seems from the description that you guys have here, it seemed like it was just a easy breezy through this incredibly complex series of acquiring data and manipulating it, but sort of like some of the things that you guys, either challenges you faced or just talk a little bit about that.
I think there are a lot of routes missing with an X. I think that's something that's lacking in this graph. This is kind of like the ideal route, but it wasn't ideal at all. I know, for example, for the pump, we had 4 different versions until we had one that was working. We were trying to get a signal for the satellite for 3 weeks with no success at all, not even a beep. And I don't know, I think
it was just noise.
Noise, yeah. And whenever we heard something slightly different, it's like, we got something, but then it went to noise, so it was nothing at all.
We also didn't know how to decode the noise, because at first we thought it was going to be different frequencies, and so we tried to visualize it in a different way, but in the end it turned out to be just one frequency, but then on and off. And so that's another one. I think that's a challenge in every step.
Yes.
But yes.
Yeah, I think that at the very beginning we wanted to have an automated, self-sustainable system. That didn't happen. I think it's quite automatic right now, at least the part of the printing, but it requires a lot more in order to have this working by its own, like just recording the satellites on its own, and also, yes, like being aware of all the physical challenges that it includes.
I was curious if the hacked bioprinter is based on like an industrial design, or like what were some of the things that you would have liked to do with the bioprinter that you didn't have time to do?
The bioprinter design is based on another bioprinter design that we found, but it didn't have enough steps to be reproduced. So when we had the controller board working, so the printer was actually moving between the different axes, it was all about getting a pump that actually was letting us work with fluid. So I think that for us, it was prototyping a lot different parts of the pump and then making it work. So we were looking into like more the single component and why it was failing, that actually looking into an industrial design that we might not be able to reproduce in the like smaller scale.
I'm not sure if you already answered that question because I just got here. Is there a specific reason you decided to use this particular slime mold instead of any other type of mold or any other type of biological agent?
Honestly, because the pattern itself, the fractal growth pattern of the molds and how fast it grows and how easy it is to find the mold, like all those factors in the end led us to the slime mold as opposed to all the other molds. So like the safety, the visual, how long it takes to grow, its safety, and it's like the accessibility of it, and how
it's
convenient
it's
it
quite
is to
resilient.
control.
It's quite resilient. Like even though it has a certain growing conditions, it survived like heat, light, or whatever. Like we had it for about 2 months now, and it's still alive. So I think that's also.
Yeah.
So about the slime mold and about the interaction with the oats and the slime mold, how much did the chance, like how much was it, like how much was it, how much what, yeah, sorry, how much was the result like was related to chance, like chance reactions, like as in like have you tried to make any duplicates of the patterns and then like put the slime mold and then like was the result same or like?
So the results are different every time, but the process of it growing is different every time, but the last image that you get is similar because it grows. So this slime mold randoms itself at first until it finds the next spot, and then it connects to the next spot, and the whole of the mold sort of goes to the next spot. And so in the end, you see a pattern of how all of the dots connect. But then the process of connecting all the dots are different every time. So it might go to the left dot first, but then eventually, all the dots would connect.
So I'm very interested in the part where from the apt.py to P5JS. So I wonder, you mentioned that you use apt.tt algorithm to kind of visualize and convert the sound file to an image. So I'm wondering how that's different from normally you would audio visualize, say, a song, like music files.
Right. So at first we tried to do that because I thought that were different frequencies within the sound, but that's just one frequency that is not dominant all the time. And so what we did instead was we actually only used the FFT analysis to discover that frequency so that we could sort of reduce all the noise around it. And then with that frequency, we tracked the amplitude of that frequency. And so when there's a beep, we set it to black, and when there is not a beep, it's white. And so these are just, if I was to play the sketch, it would go silence, and then beep, and silence, and then beep. But this is like so fast. And with the radio one, this basically works like a clock. So it goes These are the frames, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then again on here, and then again on here. Yeah.
So I was going to add into that. So we knew that the encoded message was an image, but we didn't know how it was encoded. So even though we had different decoders that worked to transform that into an image, as you can see that, when we did our own process for the sound, it was discovering how that message was encoded and how it could work for us to decode the different elements.
Any other questions?
I just had a question about, so NOAA, are those different satellites or the same satellite?
And there's 3 satellites here.
Okay, so what, by chance, do you know what the length of the pinging is by miles?
Sorry, what?
Do you know what the length of the pinging is by miles?
The length of
The height?
Or like the miles, the distance?
oh, between each one.
Yeah, so as you're receiving the signal, do you have any idea where they are, how far they are?
I know it in kilometers. I don't. It's one. It's 1,000. Yeah. The 3 NOAAs are basically improved versions of itself. Like NOAA 19 is the newest one, and NOAA 15 it was launched 20 years ago. So they weren't expecting to last so long. So if you see the images, they are very glitchy, but it still works. Like it sends the message, but the camera is stuck.
Would you guys be interested in going to Pitarch? I have a friend that works for Skyline.
Oh.
I've known him for, I would love them because it's NASA.
I'd love it.
I think they would trick on this because it's kind of cool. He's a really cool guy.
Yeah. we would
Yes.
love to.
Yeah, we love to.
I know it's different than what they're working on Skylab, and it's different than what they do, but NASA is a really cool place.
Yes.
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 Yeah, we would love to.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, okay. Thank you guys so much.
Is that on? No, that's not on. So allow us 5 minutes while we transition to the next presentation. Thank you.
Why should
everyone can see everything.
Here.
Yeah, right here. So this is as
Oh, it's on my hand. Okay.
So we have to like,
Well,
stand.
yeah, unless you, otherwise it's going to be a disembodied voice.
Okay.
So like, if you want to do like a 3, you know.
We can just. Oh, okay.
Hello? Hi. Hi, if we could ask that you please be seated as we move to our next presentation from the FWRD Fellowship. That's Angel, Beverly, and Lilian. Thank you. We're ready to start.
Hi, we're the FWRD Fellows, and just right now we're going to present our work in progress, but the final thing will be done in 2 weeks. And just more info about the FWRD Fellowship. It's a fellowship that's in collaboration with Smart Lab and Brooklyn Research, and there's a bunch of other people helping us too, like Futureworks, SecondMuse, and NYCEDC. And just a bit about us. I'm Beverly, and I'm a mechanical engineer and creative technologist, and then
I'm Lilian, I'm an industrial designer and instructional designer.
And I'm Angel. I am an industrial designer and sculptor/artist.
Cool. So just to give an overview of what our project is, we started with the question about something that really affects all of our lives, and that is food. And one of the things in New York, you don't really see a farm that often. So a big question is sometimes, where does food come from? It just appears on our grocery store shelves. And to answer this question, we are designing a strategy board game that is aimed at high school students, that is about global food distribution, and we hope that just by playing this game and embodying some of the movements that occur during food distribution, students will be more interested to learn more about the greater food system. So now I'm just going to jump into talking about how we got here and where we started with this fellowship. We started with these keywords: learning, education, development in the city, and we went through a lot of these design sessions where we were like mind mapping, and we were sitting there trying to think about different ideas. And one of the things that we started with early on was this idea of urban nature and playfulness for adults. But once again, the thing that we really resonated with as a group was food. And we were thinking about a lot of the different aspects of food, and we wanted to work with students and younger kids. So we were thinking about the different aspects of what is important to know at that age. And we talked about like cooking skills, and we talked about just like learning about cultivation. But I think the thing that's the biggest black box is like, where does our food come from? So we thought that the biggest problem that we could solve with this fellowship was to kind of give some more information about where food is coming from when it appears on your grocery store or bodega in New York. So our goal was to create an experience so students are able to connect the game that we designed to their food experiences that they have when they're eating food, and how the global food distribution system works to some extent, and to articulate this idea to their peers. We did a bunch of other ideas. We started with a game that was kind of like a Marco Polo of like, where does food come from, and had a bunch more ideas. But we eventually were talking about this idea of monopoly for shipping networks, and then we went into a really big process of like iterating and designing, and I'll let Lilian talk about that.
Yes, so we have been through a lot of playtesting around the city with within Brooklyn Research with teens, and also with other game design experts, and we got a lot of feedback and iterate upon the game mechanism, from being more like a Monopoly style moving rolling thing to more like strategy thinking. How can players like managing their limited resource and upgrade to achieve the goal. So there have been a lot of iterations, and most especially it's on the map, because we are thinking about how can we encapsulate the whole distribution system in one map, and how does the information been presented to players, and what are the interaction with the map and the players. So we have some playtest groups setting up over there, so we would like to hear your feedback. And talking about the aesthetic part, because of this project, I have been to the Red Hook farm quite often, like weekly, and I realized that there is actually a pattern, a unique aesthetic in the farm, and I'm thinking, how can I translate those patterns from the aerial photograph view to the map? So I come up with a process. First, use the clay to like modeling the patterns, and then turn it into photograph and trying to laser cut it. And we have done a couple of testing to see how this will look beautiful and still encapsulate those land patterns on our game board. Another practice is we're thinking, how can we use those images to turn into 3D modeling so that the CNC milling can go through it and like milling those patterns so that it can present on our map. And then Angel will talk more about how the transportation work.
Yeah, hi again. So one of the things that we've been taking into account that's really important is the way that things move around the map. And clearly, like, the whole distribution system is a superbly complex thing that exists behind everything that we don't see. And so, like, between that and the way that we were also like seeing how is this feasible to be able to move things around from point A to point B, given that we were within the American continent. We were looking in ways of like how else to actually move the board from one point to another without this kind of stepping and just jumping from one place to another, also making it a little bit more of a streamlined process. And so images we're seeing here are like some tests that we were doing at the very beginning of this process of making it happen. We're thinking about how rails and sweeps, ups and downs, and these kinds of things could be used in terms of the movement of point A to point B. So we're also using like the resources that we've had with Brooklyn Research as well as Tomorrow Lab and I think it was Futureworks as well, that we've been moving around these various places to see how also digital advanced manufacturing could come into play with this. And so these were like 3D printing and laser cutting. We're also aiming to work with milling just to be able to create these kinds of paths. Here we're also seeing more examples in which there was also kind of a hands-on process to seeing how the aesthetics of this could be defined. Again, like we've seen with the land, it's like this mix of yes, using technology and using hands-on approaches to be able to create these contents. And one of the things that we're also getting into is seeing how can we streamline certain softwares, technologies such as Rhinoceros to SolidWorks to Fusion 360 and seeing how all of these can complement each other in creating 3D content. We have some small samples also on the back of the area, so you're more than welcome to pass by and see them. And in this case, we're going to talk about the game mechanics, so I'll leave Beverly with that.
Yeah, so that was just all about the design of the aesthetics, and now I'll just give like a really brief overview of how you play the game. So there is this kind of like individual player board that each person gets, and then you would get a selection of cards that are representing different crops that you own. So here, like you get a starter card, and then you might get some of the money that you started with to buy some extra cards, and then at the top you can track how much time you have available to grow these things. So we have 2 different types of like units that you can spend, and one is time, and you can use that time to grow crops, and that's indicated by the yellow, or it's indicated by the green circle on the top of the card, and then you can also spend money to buy the ownership of the crop card, and as you go through the game, you track the time units on the top, and then the image before is like the time token, or the money tokens that you have to spend. So just like a more detailed look of how the crop card works. When you purchase one, there's like this tracker on the card in the middle where you track the perishability of the card, because one of the biggest things in logistics is making sure that your crop doesn't spoil by the time it gets to the city, and you want it to stay fresh. So we have that in the middle, and then also another important component of the game is seasonality. So you have to grow the crop during the time of the year that it's available. You can't grow it when it doesn't exist, and I hope that it would help students learn about how we still have certain fruits like bananas in the winter or apples in the winter when it's not something that's in season locally. And then we also have just some facts on the bottom of the card. And you can also swap out your cards for new cards by reselling it, which is the price indicated on the bottom. And then another type of card that we have is a technology card, and we just wanted to show different ways that technology is integrated into the logistics of shipping, and hopefully it's fun to learn about these things. And one of the examples here is about cartonization software, and you can purchase it for 6 money units, and you can ship more crops on one boat because it gives you an advantage of being able to package your shipments more efficiently. And the last type of card we have is a chance card. This one's still a work in progress. We need to throw an image up on there. But for each round, you'll pull one of these weather cards, and it will influence certain aspects of the transportation or growing during the game. So just to like throw a real world twist on what's happening, and to keep things exciting during the game, we have this. And then this video just shows like how I would go through and grow a crop that I already have. And basically you see it takes 3 units of time to grow it, and then I put a tracker to see how fresh it is, and then I get one of these shipment pieces, and then I put the shipment piece in the port on the country. And then when I'm ready to actually ship it somewhere, I would purchase a mode of transportation. So in this like prototype example, I've selected a boat, and then I can slide my boat along the track as it gets closer to New York, and I spend time units to actually move. across the board. And then once you arrive in New York, there's this market board, and I place my crop shipment piece on the market board, and then I collect 10 units of money. And then as you keep accumulating more of this crop, you gain less and less money, and that's just to simulate overstocking and like how supply and demand works on like a really simple scale. The more you have, the less people will pay for it. So at the end of the game, you win when you have the most money, and that's it for the most part. So thank you. Please ask us any questions, and also we're going to be playtesting the game in the meeting room, so we'd love to hear your feedback. And yes, cool. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Oh. Hi.
Yeah, just a quick question. First of all, this sounds really exciting because I don't understand food distribution at all, and I would like to play and learn about it. I guess my question was about how the point you ended on, which is you win by having the most money at the end. And I just wonder, when you're trying to, I wonder who wins. Are you playing as the distributor network, or are you playing as the citizens of New York trying to get enough food for you, or are you playing as the farm? It just seems like there are a lot of like actors who all have very different needs, and I wonder like which role are you trying to take on? And would there be a version of this game where it's competitive between the two, or all actors?
Yeah, so we actually discussed this really early on, and we were trying to figure out, like, are you a business owner in this scenario? Are you, like, one of the things that we said was, like, maybe you're just, like, a consultant and you're overseeing this whole process, which is maybe, like, the most realistic but not cool way to frame it. Because, like, there are a lot of different ways that food companies actually run this. Like, if you're, like, a big company, you have your whole system, like, probably organized, like, systematically organized by that one company. But then there's like smaller places like bodegas who have like, they buy it from this place in New York called Hunts Point, which is what our game is inspired by. It's like a main food distributor in the city, and then like they get it from somewhere else who gets it from somewhere else, and it's not really one person overseeing that supply chain. So we just kind of generalized it, and you're playing just like this consultant role, or you're playing this like lord of everything role that you do sometimes in board games, but there's no specific, like, you're a business or you're a citizen of New York. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's that. So it's also this thing of, like, upon all the research that we were doing, there was this aspect of, like, yes, we're growing, which is something that is an entire science to itself and an entire economy to itself. There's also the fact of, like, the jobbers or the runners, however you want to call them, which are the people that are ensuring that from point A to point B you actually get the goods. There's the fact of intermodal transportation. There's, like, a bunch of players within this whole thing, right? And I think we talked about this and, like, what are we measuring? Is it just the money? Is it just some other things? But trying to keep it for, like, a playable and kind of like an approachable kind of thing, especially for those people who are not, like, RPG, like, not RPG, sorry, the like heavy board game ready, because like we managed to play test some of these, and that was like really a part of the experience. It was like really heavy, 1 hour and 30 minutes to understand.
It looked like a Monopoly. It doesn't look like chess, so you must have a specific board game that inspired you for this format.
Oh, that's a great question. So we have been playing others' game that recommended by game designers, and we asked them what are the similar game that involve economics and also moving pieces along the way. And there is one called Concordia, and yeah, we play that a lot, and we play that once, start from learning the game and then play it and analyze it. So we have like a framework of how a strategic game works. So that is pretty much based on that. And
Also viticulture, there is some part of it.
yeah, a little bit viticulture, like still the agriculture, like agri process of that game and trying to mix. So yes, so there are definitely some reference in the game, yeah.
Hello? Yeah, okay. If you could build extensions for this game, what kind of elements would you like to add on to it now that you've got like a base?
Okay, this is also a great question. Thanks for asking it. Because originally we have more than 8 crops, so that definitely adding more crops that you can play and adding different characters to the crops is one. And another one's currently we're focused on the entire America territory, because we realize that most of the food are from these territories, so that's why. So another one can be adding more like Southeast Asia, Asian in general, even European. These are 2 things I can think of. There can be more.
Kind of like going back to what I was mentioning previously about the depths of complexity that each and every one of these parts have. Maybe it's also an approach to that. I mean, we also kind of kept it close in terms of like the territories that you're at, but we are not like, there's like 10 countries that we still really didn't take into consideration for it. So that's another potential expansion, so to speak. And also like weather events or technological things. So we were even talking about like kite drones and whatever it is that's used in both agriculture, distribution, and just like the distribution within like New York City. That those are all points to where this can be expanded from. So yeah.
Oh, in the back.
Could you repeat that? Well, to be honest, this is like, we had to put a hard stop on like to when the playing per se thing was going to happen, because we could have just kept on like changing here and there. We've met people in the NY playtest that have been like 2 years making a game, and they're still like working with like paper prototypes and all that stuff that look really neat. But the thing is that given our parameters, we've had to like put a stop to it and see like how we can make it with the resources that we have for the time being. So within that step of the whole potential growth that it could have, it's about like 80 to 75, I would say, because we still have to like make improvements upon like the way that the whole thing is created, think about like how it might be packaged, and like streamline any other thing that we might find. So we have playable content right now, but that's still a lot of room for improvement. We could be years in this, but yeah.
This isn't a question, but more of a suggestion. If you don't know about the Museum of Food and Drink, you should. It's in Williamsburg, and their whole goal is like educating people about like food culture and food science and food history, and I'm sure logistics of food distribution would be in their purview too. So
you mentioned the Museum of Food and Drink?
Yeah, Museum of Food and Drink.
Oh yeah, we actually didn't get to pass by that one yet.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Anyone else? Okay.
I wonder what's the most constructive feedback you get from playtests, and the feedback that you use to make some improvements.
Yeah, there was like one version that like Amaya and Will played where we like didn't keep perishability of the foods in like as an aspect of the game. So they actually were like playing in a way where you would stockpile foods like blueberries for months and months, which clearly isn't feasible, and it created a lot of tension in the game because they're like, you can't do that, but like we hadn't built in a lot of the rules for that, so there's a lot of like that was like a pretty big frustration for them, and we have integrated that into the game now, so you should play it now. And yeah, like just things like that, and also movement of the pieces. Like I think Angel touched on it briefly, but when people were moving the pieces, they'd be like, okay, I'm in South America and now I'm suddenly in New York, and like that jump from there to there didn't really give people a chance to think about like the pathway it was actually taking, whether it was like going by sea, going by land, and we just wanted to create more of an awareness of that pathway, which is why we have the design where you're actually sliding the pieces through the track. So a lot of different things. I don't know if you guys remember anything else from our many playtests.
Another big change is taking out the dice and out of our game. So previously, you were like rolling the die, and then that indicate how many movement you can make. But then after we having playtest group at NY Playtest, yes, they kind of questioning about this mechanism because it's kind a little bit outdated just because that didn't, the way that the movement are defined doesn't make a lot of meaningful, make a lot of sense to the players. And so we kind of change how the movement goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of to expand on that, there was this thing of, so the die and roll move is this thing that's from the 80s or the 70s, and it's something that currently isn't really that good of a thing to use because it's just too random. And then especially in a thing where you're supposed to strategize and think ahead and look at your resources and that kind of stuff, like that was a big feedback that we were like, okay, then how are we going to work upon this? And then that's where we started to use like both time and coin or money or however you want to call it as the resource. I guess that one is a big, and also in terms of like visibility, like how are you seeing the information? Is it clear enough? Are you understanding like, okay, well, you're starting from here and this is the way that you got to go? And also like one that we had internally was like numbers. So if the numbers don't add up, it can just be like a super frustrating thing. And also like the player order at the beginning, which is like someone can be at a super disadvantage versus the first two people that were before you just because they picked everything good. So those tweaks were made up until before we were like, let's get this made. So yeah.
Yeah. 1 second.
I think it's really cool that you have a nice way to represent geographical location, perishability, sustainability. One thing I've been thinking for a while now, have you considered sustainability? Like, how does it affect? Do you have a global warming score? I'd be tough considering that.
So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, there's in some of the, I think it was something we wanted to touch on a little bit, but maybe not have it be the main focus of. And I think I didn't show all of the weather events and all of the technology events, but some of them do touch on like, okay, like in this area, there's going to be more droughts happening because of global warming, or there's going to be a flood because global warming. And of course, it doesn't go that in depth because like, I don't think a teenager would really read the card for that long, but just that has like a small like note about it. But I guess there are definitely ways that we can integrate more of like modern technology and more of like the climate change that's happening, but it's not. Okay. The cost.
Let's say you ship something from Indonesia, it costs more to the environment. It might
Yeah,
cost
sorry,
less
it's like.
based on how you ship it, but it might cost more to the environment because the environment is absorbing the cost, not the producer. See what I mean?
I'm just gonna pull it back to the map.
Okay, so like among all of the currencies and things that we've used like to determine up until this point, like what's the winning condition? Because winning condition at the end of the game is what kind of drives it. We were considering like aspects such as sustainability, carbon footprint, how much people you feed, how much content you actually get to deliver, but they were on the board. But among the things that we were like trying to balance out in terms of playability and complexity, we opted to like perhaps like put them aside, not entirely like discard them, but at least for like these initial stages, just have them on the side. Because yes, definitely there is that, and there's like this weird economy to like, yes, you are shipping from Indonesia to California, and it's actually cheaper to come from that way because of the way the containerization works and intermodal transportation works and all of this huge economic thing that happens with it. But again, we're trying to keep it simple enough so that it could be playable. I mean, that kind of thing bringing it up, it's like there could be superbly complex board games that could take years, not years, but days, weeks. I've heard years in certain occasions, but that's not necessarily what we're aiming for because it's not that kind of crowd that we're aiming to get to.
Right now, there's parts where they're dealing with overflow plastics. And they're actually making boats now, and they're building house boats. They're just plastic. It's amazing. Some people, and they're setting up these portable units all over the globe. So there's really cool things going on. But I like what you guys are doing as far as like bringing up the dialogue. But I also wonder about the green aspect of, because we know that the carbon footprint is massive, and it's so. I mean, Amazon. This whole thing about shipping stuff over the world is this complete nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, this is so crazy. Like, people are not thinking right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, but to get people thinking about this as a strategy or challenge, I think is absolutely the right way to move. As I said, really, my parents worked in NASA. At the time that the space program was developing, a lot of these technologies actually came out of Apollo 11. 5 program.
Yeah.
So computers, solar panels, all this stuff, they had to set up things for it to survive in this zero kind of landscape without oxygen. So we have the technology to face those challenges. But people are so busy making profits.
Yeah.
They don't want to give up their profits. So it really tanks land. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's good, but I just wonder if maybe a little bit more to address the green aspect of, I don't know if that's like, if anybody's doing that too, and I think you might have a better chance of solving the game as a strategy.
Yeah.
If you kind of get in there and play with that idea.
Because I think we talked about just making some positions in the game really hard to play. So we're like, if you're shipping from super far away, you can't really win. Or like just kind of making it difficult. Like if you like strategize in a certain way, it just makes it difficult versus like if you were growing local, you would be able to turn a profit more easily. So like we talked about that. I don't know how much it's like reflected in the actual numbers of our game when you play it, but yeah, like we tried to make it like more expensive to ship from further away, and hopefully like yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
It's great. It's socially so responsible when you're doing this. It's great.
Thank you guys so much.
Ready? Good. Hi, everybody. Greetings. If it's possible, could we have you sit and be ready for the next presentation, the next minute or so? Thank you.
All right.
So I present. So we're presenting Neighbor Bandit, one of our digital fabrication residents for the summer. Take it away.
Cool. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Neva. I wanted to start off and say thank you so much for coming. You guys are going to get to see all of our hard work finally after all these months. I want to start off by saying that my projects are a bit different than the ones you've seen. I had multiple small projects to do while everyone else had one main focus. So I'll start off. So I go to NYU in Abu Dhabi. I'm a rising senior, and I'm majoring in IMA, which is the undergrad version of ITP. So I did a residency here that was the digital fabrication residency. So the idea was that I was supposed to use various machines around the space and kind of make whatever was needed here at Brooklyn Research, or to kind of mess around with different kind of research things that I could do. It'll become more clear in the presentation. So what I ended up focusing on was the digital embroidery machine that we have, the laser cutter, and the 3D printer. So firstly, for the embroidery, I used the Brother 770 PE digital embroidery machine. So I'd never really I've used a regular embroidery machine, but this was the first time doing anything this large scale with like textiles and digitally. So I worked with vectorizing designs. So taking an SVG off of Illustrator and then using, so this was the original design that I did. I did it for Pride Month. And using software, I was able to turn the vectors into stitch paths. That's how the embroidery machine works. It reads everything not as vectors, but it takes it as different stitches and different paths for those stitches. And so this was an in-work picture. And this was the final result of the first one I did. I actually want to pass it around so you guys can see it. I did a couple of other pieces that you guys will be able to see after the show. From my lovely model, Susie. So later on, you'll be able to see, I have different works on here. So I have a bonsai tree that I did on a Brooklyn Research bag. Angel, actually, from the FWRD Fellowship, he designed this pigeon, and I embroidered it for him on his bag. There's a work in process that I'm doing on the back of Susie. So it's a vector image of a Japanese demon and a geisha. This one's really hard because it's really big. So it's not complete yet. I've only done about 3/4 of it, and I still need to work more on it. But this is kind of the fruit of like what all the digital embroidering has brought. So that was my first focus. My second one was kerfing. Does anyone know what that is? No, it's okay. Oh, Johnny? You know what kerfing is? What is kerfing, Johnny?
I'll let you explain.
Okay. So I'd only heard of kerfing vaguely before, but I think it was a good thing to do with laser cutting. So it's defined as a cut or an incision made by a saw or the like in a piece of wood. But in this case, using the laser cutter. So actually, after the show, you guys will be able to like touch some of the pieces I laser cut. They're over here on the wall. So the idea is you take patterns that you can cut into different materials, and that'll give them different characteristics. So for example, this is a piece of 3mm plywood, which typically would be very still, flat, rigid. But after cutting in a certain pattern, you're able to bend it a lot. And so this can be used, sorry, this is just a close-up to see different patterns. There's patterns like everywhere. They're all over the internet, and there's so many. So the idea is you can really do different bends, different angles that you need in the wood. So these are some of the pictures of the ones I did. Again, they're going to be on the wall. You guys can totally touch them and like play with them. I ended up cutting out of 5 different materials. So I cut out of masonite. So going from top to bottom, cut out of masonite, MDF, plywood, acrylic, and seaboard. And so here's an example of kind of some of the work you can do. There's a lot of different calculators online for the ratio that you have of how many cuts in the wood, and that'll give you different angles. So I did a project where I made a box using kerfing, so you can see it on the side. This is actually just 2 pieces of plywood that were able to be bent into a circle to make a box. So this box that I made, I took a wireless charger that we had lying around and putting a sensor at the top. It lights up whenever I put my phone on it, and it's a charger. Yeah. Quite proud of that one. Oh, sorry. You guys can also pass this one. So the last thing I worked with was 3D printing. I didn't have much experience in 3D modeling, and I ended up using Rhino out of, again, some suggestions around the lab. So again, I was able to kind of make whatever the lab needed. So in this case, they were like, we want you to design chocolate for us, which I'll get to in a bit. So this was the 3D model that I made. I really liked the way the gears just looked, like in the idea of chocolate. So actually, after the presentation, there's going to be a couple if you guys want some. So this is how it came out once it was actually made into chocolate. So I 3D printed it. Here's the model. Again, I can pass it around. You guys can touch it, feel it. So I made a 3D model using silicone. I was able to make a mold of it. And then using different types of chocolate, I was able to make these kind of chocolate bars. I made milk chocolate and dark chocolate. You guys can take some. Also using 3D printing, I actually made the shelf for the kerfing. So I made the tile holders that are holding them at an angle. So again, it was just designed in Rhino. And then those are the major projects I did. Lastly, I want to keep working on the embroidery pieces that I did. I want to finish my wireless charger because there's still a couple of glitches with it, and I want to do a lot more 3D modeling. Thank you guys very much.
Does anyone have any questions?
Hey, neighbor.
Hi, Angel.
So, quick question about all of these digital manufacturing processes. Which one would you say, like for your end or like in general, would be the one that you'd be most inclined to keep on using and like exploring as a tool for creation?
The one I personally want to do more?
Yeah, within these and.
Thank you.
What can you envision within what you've learned, and knowing that you also have kind of a background with electronics and programming?
Yeah.
Like, how do you envision that?
Thanks. I definitely want to work more with the kerfing patterns. I know that there's a lot online, but I was working on writing like a simple program that would actually generate the codes for them, because there's a lot of SVGs out there, but I didn't find anything that would actually allow you to put in your own specifications and make it. And I also really like the idea of combining this kind of, I really think it's like a really cool trick to use. I think it's a good idea to use that along with circuitry. So that's why I really like the piece that I did with the charger, because I like working with like I just used an Arduino. I like working with Arduino, and then in this case I was able to combine it with kerfing. So I do want to explore more of that and just get a lot more into kerfing because there's a lot to do with it.
Anyone else? Okay.
Yes. So it's a wireless charger that we already just had here lying around. I can go back to the picture of it. The idea is I'm combining that with the Arduino. Let me find it. Yeah, so this has the wireless charger inside, and taking an Arduino, I'm trying to get the signal from the wireless charger, which will activate the lights in it. So there's actually, there's a way cooler version of this that's really flat. I don't know if people have seen it. It's like a very flat mat that lights up when people place their phones on it. I couldn't make it that flat, but this was just a way I wanted to, because also the wireless charger is supposed to go inset, like on a table. Like it doesn't really have a casing on it. It's supposed to go into a table, and so I wanted to take it and make a fun case for it. And so, yeah, I just took that with an Arduino, and so it lights up. Yeah.
Have you found carving being used for purposes besides making it memorable? When I say it, it's how many
I've seen it used artistically. I saw it used a lot for kind of night lights and lanterns, people doing interesting cuts that would let the light seep out. For the most part, though, I have seen it used for bending. I've seen, so for example, someone laser cut glasses out of acrylic, but the thing is, at the end where it actually turns, like to have the angle, they use like kerfing, so that way you take a flat piece of acrylic and you can actually wear it. But I haven't seen, besides it just looking nice and having a nice pattern, I haven't seen more than that.
Does it seem like something people can prototype if they don't have made, or like an electronic fabrication device, or people prototype scissors?
I think you can definitely prototype it with scissors. The only thing is the laser cutter is going to make it be super precise, but I definitely think you could take a piece of wood and just do cuts in it. Because kerfing itself doesn't have to be this complex. It can just be a couple of cuts in something that's already changing the rigidity of the piece. So just the thing is that the laser cutter lets you take it to such an extreme. So you could definitely model it on your own without the fancy laser cutter. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, cool. Thank you so much.
Hello? Hello. Hi, hello. Thank you, everyone. We're about to start our final presentation with Aiden. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Aiden, and for the last couple of weeks I've been working on resurrecting this motion platform here, which some of you will be able to see and the rest of you will have some photos. So what is a motion platform? A motion platform is a platform which moves. Basically, in some sort of interactive experience, be that a flight simulator is probably the most commonly known one, or more creative and out there virtual reality experiences, being able to move the person introduces a whole new level of immersion into the experience and a whole new set of technical challenges. So Brooklyn Research had this motion platform, which is out in front here. And it was sitting somewhat dormant when I arrived here, and I wanted to basically figure out how to turn this into something which could move and respond to some sort of virtual environment. Why did I want this? Well, one, I thought it would be very fun to sit on a platform and have a virtual reality headset on and experience some environment and be physically moving. But more than that, I thought it was an interesting set of technical challenges to be able to control these very strong, high-powered motors, to be able to understand how to translate virtual motion into a physical motion, and to understand the ways that motion cues are perceived by a participant, by their inner ear, and translated into an experience of motion that may or may not be actually happening. So I started by taking pictures of every part of the system, and there were a lot of parts, which I'll go into a little bit later. And I started going by training, by any means, reading documents which have references to other documents, and 500 pages of notes was not going to help me figure out what I was trying to figure out, which is how to move a person in VR. I found papers talking about control systems, and I would very quickly become lost in what this means. I don't know. And so the rest of this presentation and demo is in defense of naivete, as in I am not an engineer. I don't fully understand a lot of the systems I was trying to replicate. And so I approached it in the most simple way I was able. So I started by creating a model of the physical device in Unity, which is a game engine that many of you may have heard of. What Unity allows is allows me to use Unity's built-in physics engine. So it does all sorts of calculations about how systems might interact without me having to really touch them in much depth. And so I modeled here, there are three motors which control the movement of the platform. And what makes this whole project a little bit tricky is that in order to control the three quote-unquote degrees of freedom, the three ways in which you might want to move the platform, which are you might want to tilt, you might want to tilt forward and backward. So you might want to roll would be the technical term. You might want to tilt forward and backward, and you might want to heave, which is going up and down. And to perform any of these types of movements, you can't move only one motor. They don't map directly. So you have to move all 3 motors simultaneously. So this Unity model helped me figure out what those mappings would be from a desired movement to a set of 3 motor movements. I found myself spending a lot of time on websites like this for middle and high school math, and relearning all of the trigonometry behind how to turn desired hypotenuse into different angles for the actual motors. And I started writing very simple code that progressively got more and more complicated as I started to add in layers after layers of first abstraction and then safety, because I was worried that I was going to hurt myself. Okay, so how does it work? I think I've explained some parts of it. I'll just very quickly, I'll show you in person. You have a platform here. There are 3 motors underneath the platform, and they're connected to the platform with these little armatures. The motors themselves are driven by motor controllers, which are called inverters, which control the speed and position of the motor based on a servo feedback system, which I don't touch at all. And the way that my computer controls those systems is through these devices called fidgets, which are basically like an Arduino. I think probably everyone's heard of an Arduino. They're a microprocessor that allow me to set the position of each motor using a simple command from the computer. So I'll now do a quick demonstration of where we're at this stage in the project. So I made a little game using Unity's free assets. And I had a car and a little environment. And for those of you in the front, you can see that as the car goes up in the environment, the platform will move. And so I tried this out, and I very quickly realized that safety was needed to be one of my highest concerns, because sitting on this while trying to debug things felt terrifying. And especially once I added in a virtual reality headset, the experience of not knowing where I was going to move was uncomfortable. So I added in some safety limits, and then I quickly ran into another issue, which I will explain in just a second. Which is, the issue is, a motion platform will never be able to replicate true motion of a real object, because it's stationary. It's not actually going to move. And so how do you create cues so that the person sitting on the motion platform is able to experience the type of movement without actually moving the platform constantly? And the way that you do that is that you create cues based on changes in movement and changes in acceleration, and then you very slowly move the person back to a home position. So I'll just demonstrate that now. If you can see the platform. If I set a roll, which is a tilt to the right, or left maybe, it will begin to move back to a home position very slowly. So any change in position then gets brought back to a home position very slowly, which sets people up to then go on to the next change in position. Thank you. That's it. This is the beginning of a project, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? Oh.
I'm curious. Were you trying to mimic the surface of where the car is going, or how the suspension is going to it? It's kind of different.
Yeah, so I guess I didn't. The reason I worked in Unity was that I could basically use Unity to do a lot of physics stuff for me. So I don't have to figure out how to calculate any of that. So in Unity, the car that's moving along, I can basically query, say, what's the rotation of this car, and then shoot that into my platform directly without having to worry about the suspension or anything, because that's all done by the physics engine. So to answer your question, the rotation of the car becomes the rotation of the platform.
Anyone else? Yeah.
So there are commercial softwares for controlling motion platforms, and I didn't find any open source motion platform control schemes. So that was probably the biggest hurdle, that each company that produces a motion platform has their own set of proprietary softwares for controlling them. And so this particular one, I didn't have access to their software.
And having done this, did you like this factor of having three additional things, or would you have wanted a different way to realize three axes? Like, if you have like a up-down motor and so forth.
I don't think that it would be necessarily. I don't know. There are different types of platforms that get more advanced, but I think for the ones that are 3 degrees of freedom, as in they have these 3 axes of rotation, I think this type of setup is fairly standard.
Really cool stuff. I was wondering if you thought about, or maybe you have, modeling the jerk that comes from the forward and backward motion, because I noticed that this seems to be sort of assuming a vehicle that's kind of up and down nature, but in reality that car demo you really show, you really want to stop, and the vehicle will stop and go, and whether there's anything here that you can do.
Yeah, how do you model like forward and backward acceleration? There are people who have tried to replicate that using only 3 degrees of freedom. I haven't built that into the library yet, but that would be a next step.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.